Right, good morning, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for taking the time to join us this morning. My name's Pavinda Gill, and I'm hosting today's session. I am a regional account manager. I look after schools in the south of the region. It's a pleasure to host today's session on optimizing Google technology. We'll be looking at some of the extra configurations you could do to extend the G Suite platform functionality, obviously working in a sort of hybrid learning environment as we are in the current climate. We're also going to look at how to manage large-scale video comms to keep the wider community, including parents, in the loop, which, given the current situation, is a really, really important functionality to have available to us. Also going to be looking at some of the new developments from Google. You will have noticed in the the bottom of the right hand of your screen, there is a chat box. We'd really, really encourage you guys to ask questions as we go through the presentation. We do have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll kind of work our way through answering all those questions. If we don't get around to answering them, we'll get back to you directly. I'm going to hand over to Michael, who's one of our product managers. He's been with RM for over 20 years now. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Pavinda. So welcome everybody, and as Pavinda has pointed out, I've been here a long time. For those of you that don't know me, I've done multiple roles within RM at the moment. I'm a product manager, looking after most of our service propositions. I spent a year working with Google, and from that kind of have taken on the mantle of the all-seeing eye of Google within RM. So I spend quite a lot of time looking at how Google can help schools. I'm also a school governor. I have worked quite closely with a few schools and converting them to Google, and I still talk to them now about what they're up to. So this presentation that I'm going to share with you is around what can we do that is extra over and above the standard Google stuff. So as we go through it, I'll talk through my thinking as to why we're talking about these various different things. I'll just start sharing my presentation with you. We started off by thinking about the situation that we've been in for the last year. As a network manager, how do you approach helping your school do what they need to do through Google? So for a lot of schools, Google might have been bubbling away in the background, and you as a network manager were managing a network and occasionally some Google stuff. All of a sudden, you're having to do some pretty wild and wonderful things. The school that I'm a governor at, the teachers there have been really quite innovative with the way that they've used Google, and they're lucky enough to have people that know how to administer it. There are a few things that I have been asked by schools that I'm going to cover off as we go through this presentation, particularly around, as Pavinda said, looking at communications. So I've been asked a lot over the course of the last 9 months or so, how can we create good video presentations and things like that. So I'm going to talk through YouTube, which has been, since I worked with Google, a question that comes up a lot is, how can we use YouTube, or is YouTube safe to use? I'm going to talk through some of the security settings and how you can get that set up. I'll also talk through some parental engagement tips. So something I'm hearing on the other side of all of this from a lot of parents is, how do I keep engaged with what's going on? So I'm just going to give you some tips on stuff that I've seen working in schools and ways that they've got around that to keep parents in the loop without overburdening them or having to do constant letters home and things like that. And then finally, we'll talk about what's new and what's coming up. So Google have been putting in quite a lot of effort to make sure things are being updated, and I'm pretty sure the pandemic has accelerated some of this stuff coming through. So we'll talk about some of the new developments that have recently come out, and we'll also be looking at some of the enterprise features as well, if you're not aware of the extra layer of offering. So we'll start off with managing YouTube. Everybody knows YouTube. Most people will look at YouTube as somewhere where you have all sorts of videos of all sorts of things, and because it's essentially a video version of social media, most schools try to block that and avoid using it. So, I mean, obviously that decision is down to your school as to whether you want to allow YouTube or not. There are ways that you can secure it and make sure everything's locked down. So we're going to talk through some of that. Those of you that have been using the admin console for a while may look in the admin console and think to yourself, well, actually, I don't get much control over that. Well, I'm going to show you some ways that you can get a bit more control over what people see and how those videos are put out. So this is where some of the stuff came from. So the things that have come up while I've been talking to schools. So whole school communications. Once Meet was no longer able to be shared with more than 100 people, so once they pared that back again, whole school communications became difficult. Equally, whole school communications through Meet with everybody on a conference isn't necessarily the best way of doing it. So doing that through YouTube is actually a really cool way of doing conferences. And when Google do any of their live Q&A sessions with partners, they'll do that through going live on YouTube. So I'll show you some of that. Also doing school tours. So now is the season for people wanting to come and tour your school. Well, obviously school tours are very difficult to manage. So producing videos and putting those onto YouTube for potential parents to come and see is a useful way of doing these things. Non-interactive presentations, so a bit like assemblies, anywhere where you don't really want people chiming in and being able to talk back to you, that's somewhere where you can do it. So YouTube is a good place for that. Also external communication, so if you wanted to create a video that was for students but also for parents, you could do that. And controlled Q&As as well, you can do all that through YouTube. So those are some of the things that have come up. There is obviously some things within that you would start to get a bit nervous about. So if you're putting in external communications, putting them live on the internet, not great. You don't necessarily want people to be able to find your assemblies on YouTube. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can lock this stuff down so that only people with links can find those videos. So we're going to look at three sections. We're going to look at the Google Admin Console. So I'll talk you through, for those of you that are new to the Google Admin Console, there are some schools that are surprised and don't realize that YouTube is actually part of Google. I'll show you where you can find the admin controls. We'll talk through those in a little bit. And then we will start to delve into some of the other stuff that you can do around Studio. So if I start off, let me just check I've got my screen shared in the right place. So if I stop sharing that, and there we go, share this. So you should now be able to see my admin console. So within admin console, down the right hand side, we've got apps. And if I go into apps, additional Google services, what you'll find is, if I scroll down, so it's not a core functionality, so it's not a core product, but it is something that sits underneath. So you'll see that YouTube is there, and you've got your controls, and within here you can do various setups. So you can make that choice as to whether that's on for everyone or off, and you can set that on various different levels. What that means is that if they're logged in up here and you've turned it off, they won't be able to get to YouTube. So they would have to come out of your tenancy. A useful thing, particularly if you're sending Chromebooks home, because it means that they have to be signed in and they have to work around it. So if you didn't want them accessing YouTube at home, you could do that via an organizational unit with Chromebook. Content settings. You have various different settings. The approved videos is something that we talked about early on with all of this stuff. So being able to approve videos and say that this video is approved for use within this account means that you can restrict what YouTube videos are available. Within here, I've added some approved videos. So there's this, which you'll see a bit later on. Then I've also allowed an entire channel to be viewable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about creating a channel for your school and how that can link into being able to make it really easy to make videos available, rather than having to individually approve. Signed in users in your organization can watch only restricted and approved videos in the setup. So that's making sure that's working. And then you've got your special approvers. So people that can approve videos. What we do is we tick this box saying verify Google Classroom teachers can approve videos. You can then click this link and that will take you through to the verified teachers. I don't think I've got any in this group, but you would have within there. So that means that any teacher that is verified as a Google Classroom teacher can approve videos as they come through. So those are the pretty simple admin permissions. So you can set the various different permissions at different levels. So strict restricted YouTube access, moderate unrestricted, can approve videos at these different levels. To be honest, that's something that you can have a play about with and test out. This is why most people get nervous around doing YouTube in their school, is that they find that that isn't restrictive enough. They don't have enough control, particularly around things like comments. That's a concern. So you end up in a situation where you lock it down to a point where no one wants to use it. The more granular controls you'll find within creating your own channel. So we'll do that now. I will unshare this screen. So I've got a couple of different browsers. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, this is one of my teachers. And Ang is in YouTube. So just gone to youtube.com. I'm signed in. And then here, if I click here, I can create a channel. What I recommend is you guys as admin create a channel for the school rather than letting individual teachers create channels. So they can collaborate on that channel, they can add playlists to that channel. The more channels you have, the more confusing it's going to be. You want to make sure there's one channel and that it's controlled. So we'll go through this and just get started. You can choose a custom name or use your name. I had some errors with this last time. Yeah, not sure what's going on with that. That might be a permission thing. But if I go through, create a channel, get started, and use my name. Obviously, I would recommend doing it the other way around, but for the sake of you seeing this happen, I'm going down this route. So there you go. You can add some information in here. You've got your links to other sites. Set that up later. And then I have my channel. So from here, I'm now going to jump into the channel that I made earlier because there's more stuff in that. So let me jump out of this and go back to sharing this one. So if I go here, go to YouTube. Once that catches up, I can then go to my channel. So because this is already set up, I've set up a school YouTube channel. There's a bit more information in here. We've been creating playlists for the different groups, so you can set those up. I'm not going to go through all of the setting up of videos, uploading videos, playlists, and all the rest of it. That's reasonably straightforward. What I'm going to show you, because you guys are technical, is the settings. So this would be the next step that you would go through with setting up a YouTube channel. And this is the bit where you get to decide and make sure that any videos within here are controlled. Okay, so we won't worry about notifications, playback and performance, privacy, connected apps, billing and payments, because we're not going to be doing any of that. It's the advanced settings we want to go into. Let me just check I've got that right. Advanced settings. Hold on. That doesn't look right. Bear with me a moment. I think it's YouTube Studio I want to go to. Apologies, right, sorry. This is where we want to be. So YouTube Studio is where you do a lot of the editing and managing. And this is what I was looking for, right. Okay, so default units, don't really want to worry about that. You're not charging anybody and you probably don't want to be making money out of this channel. I don't think that's ethical. So basic information, you're going to say UK, seminar school, education, remote learning. I've added some keywords, but I don't think that is necessarily that important. Here's some of the stuff that you want to look at. Okay, so your audience. Do you want to set the channel as made for kids? So this will save you a load of headaches around turning this off, turning that on. If you say, yes, this channel is as made for kids, I always upload content that's made for kids. It will make sure that there's a load of stuff that is just turned off as standard, which we'll see as we go through the various different sections. So notifications, comments, and stories will be disabled. So those are bits that people worry about a lot. Obviously, ads get turned off as well. You can also turn off those interest-based ads here too. And that's a big thing to tick. Make sure that's ticked off. Features, don't worry about too much. Upload defaults. The only thing I would say in here is if you're planning on creating videos, you want to set these to unlisted. So this is the thing that I was talking about. The school that I'm a governor at, they get very nervous about videos being put out in the public domain. They don't like to use Facebook. They're concerned about using Twitter because of the fact that it opens them up to unsolicited criticism, I think is probably the best way of putting it. So what they want to make sure is that it's set to unlisted. Unlisted means you can't search for that link to a video. You can't find the channel without being told about it. So you are only able to access that channel if you're told about it and given the link. It doesn't go as far as restricting people from finding it. So if you sent a parent the link to a video and they decided to then send that out to 100 people, that would be accessible by anybody. Anyone can watch it. So we need to be careful about making sure that you are not doing anything that involves kids videos with students in them. So you wouldn't want to put that stuff up on YouTube unless there's explicit consent. But unlisted is probably the way you want these things to go up, so that only people that have been sent the link get it. Upload defaults. You'll see that there's nothing that I can change in here to enable comments. This is because I've put it on kids mode. So anything that I upload will not be allowed comments. And then permissions, I can invite along a number of teachers to give access to do that. So I can say, if I invite Ang Lee, let me so that should be, let me just check that. Bear with me. So that should be there. So I can set Ang Lee, I don't need to add her in, as a manager. So can remove and edit everything, can't delete the channel. Editor, which is not able to add or remove others or delete videos. What I'd probably suggest is just having an editor limited selection on there, so they can edit everything, but they can't add or remove others, delete videos, or the channel. So they can upload stuff, but they can't make massive changes to what's going on there. It depends on the level of control that you want as an administrator, really. So once you've added those on, I'll just remove that. You've then got a channel that gives everyone access to be able to use it. We can add in moderators and things like that. This is more about comments and live Q&As, which is something I'm not going to get into, because generally what we're aiming for is not having people commenting. And there you go. So you're not going to have any agreements. Obviously, some people make money out of running YouTube videos. We're not going to do any of that. So, okay, discard changes. So that is what I would recommend, that if you're going to use YouTube, whether that's for uploading playlists or creating videos yourself, just make sure you've got your own channel set up and use YouTube Studio to set those settings to make sure that you're protecting as much as you possibly can, and then just do some testing to make sure you're happy with that. Okay, the next thing I was going to talk about is if you wanted to communicate with everybody, including parents, and have kind of an assembly, which, to be honest, at this time of year is probably something that you quite like to do, is some messages from the head teacher or from whoever it may be over a video, rather than an email or a Google Meet. So what you can do is, up here, we can say go live, which could be interesting because there's 2 video streaming sessions at the same time. So the first thing I'll say about this is that if you are planning to go live, you need to register a telephone number, and it will send you a verification code, and then you need to respond to that verification code, and it will take 24 hours to go to a point where you can go live. So if somebody is saying to you, I need to do this in the next couple of hours, you won't be able to set this up in a couple of hours. It's 24 hours. It took me, I think it was over 24 hours before I was able to get into these settings. Okay, so interestingly, let me just see if I turn my camera off. I think it might, we'll see if it will let me use that. No, so I'm not going to be able to do that. So a few things I can take you through with this. I did wonder whether that might be a problem. Just put my video back on. On the left-hand side here, we can stream. We can also use a webcam. So this is auto-detecting the webcam. If you've got, there are 3 different options that you have. There is a mobile phone, which is what you'll see the YouTubers using. You have to have, I think, over 1,000 subscribers to use a mobile phone. And for the kind of communications you're going to want to do as a school, mobile phone is probably not an appropriate way of doing that. Webcam, simple enough, on a Chromebook or a laptop, you just run it off the webcam. The other one is an encoder, which is where you've got a full studio setup. If you've got that, then I would definitely recommend using it to make a more professional video. So if you guys have got all that kit, then you can link all of that in. The other option here is to be able to schedule these for later. So if you know that there's going to be an assembly coming up, you can schedule that in and you can start sending links out. So very much like we've done here, you would receive a link saying, come to this webinar. That is also controlled by the settings that you put into RM Studio that say whether something is going to be public or whether something is going to be unlisted. So you'll see, if you remember, I didn't save the changes. This is automatically set to public. If I'd saved those changes, that would be showing as unlisted, and that would mean that someone would have to have the link sent to them to find it. Okay, so those are some tips on YouTube. Hopefully that's helpful. Let me just get back to my presentation. As I say, there's large amounts of information that we could go through with YouTube. It's a try it and test it thing, I think. It very much depends on what your school want to do and how comfortable they are with what they're using. But for a lot of schools, they don't realize they've actually got that tool available to them. And I have heard of schools who have got Google but want to do something bigger, have started to use things like Zoom, where you've got YouTube here, which is a very, very powerful tool. You can also do video editing within YouTube as well. And if you want to know more about video editing and how you can edit together some of the stuff that you've created, then I would absolutely recommend having a look at any YouTubers' how-to videos, because those guys really know what they're doing. The other thing I should mention is if you've gone live and you've created a video, once you've finished creating that video, it will then upload to our YouTube Studio, not our studio, and will give you the option to edit it and then make it live on your channel. So it means that people can catch up with that at a later date. It doesn't automatically make that available. And obviously, because everything's unlisted, it's only if someone's been sent a link that they'll be able to get to it. Okay. Next up, one of the things that I know schools have struggled with, I say struggled, that's probably unfair, have done amazing things with, but maybe there are some things they could do to enhance that, but keeping parents in the loop of what's going on in school. Now, emails, text messages, all the rest of it. If you're a parent of a student at school at the moment, or more than one, you're probably inundated with stuff that is pinging to you about what's going on in the school, which is great. But there are also some things around, is my student doing enough? Is my child doing enough? Can I do anything extra with them? And I know from my experience of talking to teachers, they are stretched at the moment because they're working in bubbles. I'm sure you know, they're having to work very, very long hours, and it's intense. So the extra stuff of being asked to update parents and get information out, they're doing it because that's their duty, and they don't want students to fall behind. But there are some ways we can help them to improve on that, maybe. Google Sites. So if you have been using Google for any amount of time, you probably know about Google Sites, although quite often when I talk to techies, Google Sites is it's a bit of a rubbish website creation tool. If you're used to creating proper websites, these are much more kind of internal websites, but they're really easy to spin up, very quick to link stuff into, and they can be shared externally as well. So unlike other internal websites that I won't mention the name of, this is a tool that you can use to then give options for people to access from outside of the school. So let me unshare and reshare my screen. So I go back here. So I'm going to go to Google Sites. So if you haven't created a Google site before, it's really easy to do. You go to Google Sites. This is standard built-in functionality. Obviously, you need to give people access to be able to do this. I would suggest not giving students access to be able to do this and just giving it to teachers. So start a new site, really simple. I won't go through the whole process. So I can add a page title. I can then embed things like Drive, so I can add in stuff that links through to other areas. I can embed things. So if you wanted to embed a Google Classroom, you could do that. You can add in images. There's all of this stuff down here. You can add in maps, calendar. So all of the information that you have stored internally on your network, you can surface that on this web page for parents to be able to get to. So rather than taking you through the building of all of this, I will, in true Blue Peter style, show you. Here's one I made earlier. So this was a mock-up of something that I was trying to do for a distance learning hub to help put these things together. So without going through major detail of exactly what we're going to do, you'll notice this video has come from the YouTube channel. This is an approved video that can be played as I'm logged in. So you might do a welcome message from the head teacher or the latest update from the head teacher. You could upload that directly to here and it will sit as a video that can just be played. You can then add in links to the various different sections of your setup. So if you've got a YouTube channel, you could link it in here. If you've got specific classroom stuff, you can link it in here. So within Classroom, this would take you through to Classroom itself with a link. You would then sign in and you get all your classes. So if every student was saying, well, I don't know how to access this, the parents can use this website to use as a reference. So one of the tips that comes from various stuff that I've read across schools in the States doing this is have these quick links. As an admin, if you set this up and then say, right, you could feel free to add pages to it. Here's one quick tip. If you create a page, but then don't show it in navigation, that essentially becomes a template. So I can then go to this page and I can duplicate that page and I can say e-resources, and then that has got the same template as everything else. So it just saves teaching staff from creating their own version of that website so that it keeps looking nice and reasonably slick. As you can see, I've just added these links within here. You can preview this. So that's what it's going to look like. If I go up to home, this is what it looks like for someone accessing. So it's not, these aren't terrible web pages, but they're pretty straightforward. You can see some class stuff in here that I added in as well. So what you'll note there, let me just go back to show you what that is. You can see these are embedded onto the home page, whereas these are individual pages themselves. You want to make that here, you just drag and drop it, or then take it out of there. So this can then be, if I get a link, you can then embed this into your website. So if I go off to somewhere outside of, let me just close this stuff down. So this is my work account. So you can see mokes@rm.com. So I'm nothing to do with that domain. I should be able to access that page. There you go. So I've got access. As long as I've got the link, I can get into this stuff. So two sides to that. One, great, you can put it on a website and you can give people access to it. Two, make sure you're not posting anything there that is going to cause problems. So make sure there isn't any personally identifiable information within there. Make sure there's nothing that's sensitive within there. This is just should just be a bank for resources. If parents are looking for stuff that they can do with their kids, if they're worried about them falling behind, you can just start to put some of that resource up here rather than them having to go to the teacher and ask questions. They can be pointed to this resource. Okay, the other thing I was going to talk about within here, let's go back to my presentation, was Google Classroom. So those of you that have been using Google for a long time are probably aware that you can get Google Classroom summaries. so Guardian summaries, which are email summaries of what's been going on within Classroom. For a lot of schools, they didn't set these up because Classroom wasn't being used enough. If now you've gone down the route of using Classroom more, you can set up these summaries. I'm not going to go through the whole way of setting it up. I'm just making you aware of the fact this is something that's available. And if you've been asked to do it, I'm going to show you talk to you about a quick way of setting this up. So what are the Google Guardian summaries? They will tell you any missing work from the week. They will also tell you what work is coming up during that week, and it will give some information. All of this stuff is pulled straight from Teams, not Teams. Terrible faux pas because I work on Microsoft all the time. All of it's pulled from Google Classroom. So the teacher doesn't actually have to do anything to make that happen. What you need is the Guardian email address to add in to those classrooms. Obviously, the way of doing that, or it may not be obvious to you, for a teacher would be to go through and add that manually next to every student. That's just not feasible, really, unless you're working in a very, very small school. So you can do this via a thing called GAM, or Google Apps Manager. So for those of you that don't know what GAM is, I did an hour-long session on GAM, which was just an overview, a starter session around that. Google Apps Manager is a way of command line, using command line to inform the console to do certain things. So it means that you can do big bulk operations really quite simply through just adding a few lines of code. As I say, I did a whole hour's session of that last year, I think it was at the end of last year. So if you want to know more about what GAM is and you haven't heard of it before, a couple of places to look. One of them is github.com, GAM. Go to that website. That's got all the information that you need to run it. The other one is to find the recording of the presentation I did last year, which will take you through some of the basics and where to look and all the rest of it. So there's two ways you can do this. You've got GAM create Guardian invite, and then that would be this top line here. That is a single line, so you would have to write that numerous times, which isn't saving you a lot of time. If you are pulling this information out of the MIS, if you can get that information from your MIS and have within that CSV file the Guardian's email address next to their student's email address, or you can find a way of pulling that information together, put it into a CSV, and then you can create a bulk job, which will mean that it will run through every single line on that and update all of the classrooms. It's a really, really neat way of getting everybody onto that. So if you're finding that teachers are having to spend a lot of time updating parents or feel they're not updating parents well, then this is a good way of doing that, and this is a quick win for you. And obviously you don't need to tell anybody that you've done it this way, and you can just look like the hero for managing to do it so quickly. Okay, so next up, what's new? So we've got about, I wanted this session to be about half an hour, but we're overrunning a little bit. So I'm going to step through some of the new-ish stuff releases from Google. They brought out a dump of stuff sort of September, October time, and they've continued to release some things in November. So pretty much everything I talk about has been released. Whether it's filtered down onto your particular tenancy yet or not, I don't know. Depends on the release schedule that you've got. So first thing to talk about, if you weren't aware, didn't spot it when I was looking at the admin console, Google Workspace is the new name for G Suite. Now that hasn't actually officially been pushed out to education, so education is still referring to the platform as G Suite for Education, but eventually that it will flow down into Google Workspace. So it means that at the moment, on the face of it, we have some new icons. So it's a bit of a refresh, but it's nothing to worry about in terms of functionality. It's going to be, I was going to say exactly the same. It won't be exactly the same because they're going to release new stuff, which I'm about to talk about. But the Workspace part of it is just a renaming, so they're trying to rebrand it. Next up, those of you who aren't aware of G Suite Enterprise for Education, I'm going to talk through some of the stuff that's within this version of Google. So I talked to Google at BET probably 3 years ago now about enterprise for education. So that they had an enterprise version which was for corporate, and they had earmarked this for universities. And the conversation was, I thought that probably secondary schools would like this, and maybe primary schools. They've added a load of functionality in, so it's a bit bigger than it was back then. But they are starting to make it more appealing to schools, particularly now because these platforms are being used much more. Some of the security features and some of the additional features that you can use are worth looking into. So I'll step through a very top level version of this. You could probably do a couple of hours talking about enterprise and all the different stuff that's in it, and digging into it and doing demonstrations and all the rest of it. I'll give you a top level overview of the stuff that it does, because some people aren't aware of the fact that it's available or what really it means for them. I think the biggest thing that people noticed was the limitations on Google Meet. That was opened up obviously for an amount of time, and that has now been closed down again. That's why a lot of people started looking at this, but there's so much more to it than that. So they break it down into sort of 5 sections. So enhancing security, visibility, and control. There are enhancements to the security. There are enhancements to what you can see within security as well. Do more with your data and insights. So being able to report on that information and being able to open up much bigger dashboards on how is my domain performing. Expanding learning possibilities with video, which is the being able to do more things with Google Meet. Empowering authentic thinking. This is one that often gets missed. So this is around plagiarism and being able to spot plagiarism automatically without having to go through it yourself or pick that up. There's a tool within Enterprise that does that. Priority access to dedicated support, possibly less of a concern. So how does this break down? I'm not going to run through all of this, and I'm pretty sure you guys will get these slides anyway. This is all being recorded, so you'll be able to run through this in more detail. So there's, on the left hand side, we're looking at G Suite for Education. On the right hand side, there's the advanced bit. So security and admin controls are enhanced. Enhanced mobile device management, also data regions, Gmail logs and admin reports in BigQuery. You can integrate with compliant third-party tools. The bits I think that are interesting here is Security Center and Security Investigation Tool. So being able to, and this was something that was always leveled at Google, was that Microsoft do loads of stuff with security and we're able to configure things. And Google just did a lot of that stuff for you. With this, it gives you a lot more granular access to be able to look at the security that's on your domain. In the teaching and learning tools, unlimited originality reports, student-to-student detection on those originality reports as well. So you can see whether they're copying each other. These bits probably less important. Up to 250 participants in those meetings, and live streaming up to 100K in domain participants. That live streaming is using Google Meet. So actually, if you upgrade here, the stuff that I've said about YouTube, potentially you wouldn't necessarily need to use that. And then record meetings to drive. The only thing I would say within that live streaming is that you have less of a control over if you just open it up to everybody to be able to access outside so that you can put it on a website. I'm not sure how exactly that would work, so it's one that I haven't investigated. Some of the same information here. These are some of the things I'm going to talk about these in a moment. There's some stuff that's being added in. So hand raising, something that lots of people wanted. You can do it in Teams. This has been released in Q4. So it was released on, I think, on the 17th of November, and we're starting to trickle down to domains. I haven't checked whether that is available on the domains that I'm part of yet. We'll talk about these in more detail in a moment. Within Enterprise, you have things called breakout rooms. So if you've got lessons going on, you can have a breakout room where some people will go off and work separately. So you can start to silo off a Google Meet so that people have these conversations in different sections. You can have Q&As, you can have polling, intelligent noise cancellation, which is fantastic, and attendance reports. I have seen that there was a news report recently that because Microsoft are making this possible, they're getting some criticism because home workers feel like they're being spied on. So there's that side to it too. This really will tell you what people have been doing in classroom and how long they've been in there for. So, as I say, some upcoming features, some really great stuff in there. The enterprise stuff, intelligent quality, attendance tracking, breakout rooms, Q&A polling. So we're just going to talk about some of these additional features very briefly. I realise we're running reasonably low on time. The 7x7 grid view has come out. So that means that you can have up to 49 attendees showing on a video at once, which should be good enough for any class. Collaborative whiteboard with Jamboard, so being able to do collaboration on a board with a classroom means that there's some real enhancements there in the ability to get people to share their ideas in different ways. So that's something that quite a lot of educators are excited about. Blur or replace backgrounds, so you can not have a background like this, and you could be on a beach somewhere. What would be useful and is there, which is I'm sure you'll be happy to hear, admins can disable custom backgrounds as needed, because I'm sure some people would take advantage of that. Attendance tracking to see and track which students attended virtual class. That's within enterprise, but that is a feature that I think would be useful, especially as we're seeing reports of students not really engaging with the online classes and just kind of walking away from them. Breakout rooms, so educators can split classes into simultaneous small group discussions, also enterprise. So we talked about that. I've said launching imminently with a hand raising because, as I say, I'm not sure whether that's available or not just yet. I know that it was released on the 17th of November, so it'd be worth checking your domain to see whether that's there. And stuff in Google Classroom, student engagement metrics, deeper integration with other teaching tools. So they are working on these areas. So there'll be more integration into the various different tools. I think one of the things that they've realized is that everything had become slightly separate and wasn't as knitted together as it could be. So they're working to pull that together again, something that Google's always been good at. Mobile offline improvements. This looks great. So we know that some students, disadvantaged students, will be going home, and if they get put into isolation, they're in a situation where they don't really have a good internet connection. So if they're being given a Chromebook, Google are actively working on making that easier for them to access offline stuff and do things offline. So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. It's in development. So keep your ear to the ground for that. And integrated admin capabilities for deploying and managing classrooms. So that's kind of what they're focusing on at the moment. The one thing I was going to mention that I didn't, just on the enterprise thing, is that obviously security is a big thing at the moment. And if you're not aware, I'm aware of this in a couple of different ways. My wife's a police officer, so she lets me know these things, that a lot of criminals have started to go online now. So the guys that used to just do stuff walking the streets face to face, as you might call it, are now actively trying out, saying, well, what have I got to lose by trying cyber stuff? So that's where we're seeing a lot of scams and fraud. What it is to make you aware of is the fact that because everyone is online, all of that is stepping up. So the people that were already doing cybercrime are starting to target schools more, starting to target universities more. So making sure you are secure and not allowing people to get into your domain, quite often that comes through email, is important. So those security settings will be a real help. Right, I have waffled on for far longer than I intended. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Michael, for the content there. Really, really useful and interesting stuff. I'm sure it's going to make us go away and think about a few things. So I appreciate that. So guys, as a quick reminder, there's a little box in the right-hand bottom of your screen. So if you want to pose any questions, please feel free to do that, and we'll start working our way through. And we have our first question. So, could schools also set up a year group channel? So if teachers want to set up playlists linked to specific topics, etc., then pupils would have videos just for them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've suggested just one channel, but there shouldn't be anything stopping you from creating multiple channels. So yeah, you should be able to do that.
Okay, and that can be specific, can it? Just to that year group, or you can have, I assume, multiple, Michael.
Well, I mean, the channel itself is going to be accessible to anybody that has a link to it.
Okay,
There are ways that you could put that so that it gets surfaced to certain groups of users, so you wouldn't necessarily it wouldn't be locked down. It wouldn't be only these users can access that channel. But if you were to say have a website, have a Google site that they accessed, and they had a page on there, or you put it into something in a Google Classroom, then it would mean that they would get first access to that, and that other people wouldn't necessarily see that link.
okay, cool. Thank you very much. Next question. I get an invalid request when trying to create a channel in YouTube.
So did I, Tracy. So I think that may be something to do with permissions. It's I would have to have a look at what that is. I think there's probably permissions involved in that it's saying you can't create a channel. I would have a look into it for you. I can more than happy to take that as an action to pick
Thank
up, run through, and then if we've got your email address, Tracy, I can send out. Or actually, if it's useful to everybody, we can just email everyone.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
What that
Yeah,
is.
I'm sure people will probably encounter similar problems as they're sort of working their way through, so that's great. I don't see any further questions at this stage. So I guess really just want to take the opportunity to say thank you, for joining us today. The webinar recording will be up within sort of 24 hours of the event. We have got a couple of other webinars that might be of interest to some of the guys that are on this call. So we've got safeguarding and security, protecting school and pupils' infrastructure and technology. That's on the 2nd of December. And for those of you guys who are still in that sort of situation where you haven't decided whether you're going to go Google or you're interested in what Microsoft are doing, we have another session on maximizing engagement in a hybrid learning world, optimizing Microsoft technology, and that is on the 11th of January. So again, you can go on to the webinar site and get yourself signed up to as many of those as you like. As per usual, the recordings will be available if you can't make the day and time. Just really want to say thank you for taking the time to attend. There will be a short survey that comes across to you after this session, so we would really, really appreciate the feedback, just to ensure that we sort of continue to deliver interesting and useful content, and just want to make sure that our future events are sort of informed by what your interests are. So Michael, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, ladies and gents, for your time. Really, really appreciate that, and we'll start closing down the session. Thank you.
Cheers all.